I thought that I could turn the interview into an artistic form. Just do what you think you should do. You're the director. Hello? Hosanna was written in about 3 months, about 6 years ago, right at the time that my first and only child was born. I felt that I could only maintain a certain tempo for so long. I felt like when my child was born that I would change, and that was true, actually. I could never write Hosanna again, just because I don't have the same level of intensity that I once had. So it was important for me to get all the stuff out as quickly as possible. Originally the manuscript was 300 pages long. It's been cut down to about 160 pages. I think the book is accessible to anyone who has an IQ higher than 60. I don't think it's particularly obscure at all. It took 6 years to get it published. I actually thought it would never be published. And one lone obscure publisher out of Arizona, Carl Cavito, has taken a chance on it. And I think he's a brave man for doing so. Say a lot in just a few lines, and that's the way my mind was at the time that I wrote it. I felt like I had to get a lot out in a very short amount of time, and the aphorism was the perfect conduit for that. And just also at the time, I was very tired of describing things in narrative form, and I wanted to break from the narrative and get back to a kind of pure poetry. That's the way I see aphorisms, as the purest kind of poetry, in which you see narrative can become a kind of contamination of thought, is the idea behind this. Whereas when you use a pithy statement, you cut to the quick, right? And you do it in such a way that you don't lose any of the energy of one's original utterance. And to me that was a very intoxicating thing to do. And also I felt like it was a form that I got right nearly every time, and I didn't second guess myself very much. Naturally I did take out a lot of the original statements from the original draft, but by and large most of what I wrote I was able to keep, until Carl got a hold of the collection and decided it was too long, and a lot was lost in that editing process. But that may be another book that comes out. The thing is, I mean, if one is going to be truthful about the nature of literature itself, then one would have to conclude that literature is already fragmented. Even those novels that seem to be totally embedded with narrative form ultimately do not come to any conclusion. This is true of Dostoevsky, this is true of Tolstoy, and I think actually if we were to consider what Faulkner is doing, we'll see the narrative form being destroyed, even though he does implement narrative. It's just inevitable that that literature would go back to its most primordial substance, which is the short, pithy statement, which is what an aphorism is. Everything goes in cycles, and I would argue that we are at a particular point in literary history where literature is having to be redefined, and before it is redefined, it has to go back to its origins, and the origins happen to be the aphorism. You could have two people who were consciously attempting to have a dialogue on the page that was that one could say rises to the level of art, or you could have a fictitious interview, even with oneself, and that becomes a literary form. That's not at all what's going on in Complete with Missing Parts. It's just a dialogue. It's just dialogues with people that I thought were interesting. Looking back on it now, with just a few exceptions, I would reconsider who I'd interviewed actually, and I think perhaps I'm going to give up on interviews altogether just because I got rather bored with them. Perhaps other people just don't interest me very much. I think that the best teachers should be silent and simply point their students in the right direction. In other words, give them the right books to read. I think that, for me anyway, to speak about philosophy and literature is to already destroy it. And teaching is something that I've had to do to survive, but it is not something that I believe in for myself, which would explain why I'm going into publishing, because teaching for me is a soul destroyer. It's true that I will attempt to put things in their proper form, but as far as the content, as far as the stylistic qualities of the writing itself, that I do not tamper with it after it's out. Ginsberg said, first thought, best thought, and that's been my motto for quite some time. I think that writing is quite relevant to the 21st century, even though it might not appear to be at this time. I think a novel is certainly dead and perhaps should never come into existence. But I think that poetry is alive as it's always been alive. Everything is poetry. That will not die until we die. So do I think that literary writing is a thing of the past? Absolutely not. I think we've gone through a period in which people have become obsessed with technology and have sort of given themselves over to the reality of the screen. It's a completely different way of experiencing reality from the screen. Okay, it's and I'm rather hostile toward people attempting to turn books and so forth into movies, even though there is justification for that at times, simply because writing doesn't owe the movies anything. It's its own thing, completely. And I think that ultimately poetry will prevail in this culture. It has to be, because, as I say, everything is poetry. And that's not going to change until the species itself dies off, and of course the species will die off.